Here are real-life spies that operated through extreme secrecy. Number 9. Lucky Luciano. Charles, or Lucky Luciano's story as a spy has an uncanny resemblance to the movie Suicide Squad. Having come from a family of crime lords, Luciano was responsible for bringing about a change in the way the mafia and other criminal organizations worked. He was born in November 1897 and was of Italian-American ethnicity. For someone sentenced to 30 to 50 years in prison, he did extremely well for himself when he was negotiated a secret deal with the U.S. government. In 1942, the U.S. Office of Naval Intelligence was concerned about German and Italian agents entering the United States through the New York waterfront. They also worried about sabotage in these facilities, so, because of the fact that the Costa Nostra controlled the waterfront, the Navy struck a deal with Luciano. Luciano promised the complete assistance of his organization in providing intelligence to the Navy in exchange for a lesser sentence. Luciano's ally, Albert Anastasia, who controlled the docks, allegedly promised no dock workers' strikes during World War II. However, the value of Luciano's contribution to the war effort is highly debated. In 1947, the naval officer in charge of Operation Underworld discounted the value of Luciano's wartime aid. But on January 3, 1946, as a presumed reward for his alleged wartime cooperation, Governor Thomas E. Dewey reluctantly commuted Luciano's sentence on condition that he didn't resist deportation to Italy. Luciano accepted the deal, although he still maintained that he was a U.S. citizen and not subject to deportation. On February 2, 1946, 2 federal immigration agents transported Luciano from Sing Sing prison to Ellis Island in New York Harbor for deportation proceedings. Whoops, there you have it. How many of you guys knew Lucky Luciano was a spy? Number 8. Virginia Hall. The Limping Lady is what she goes by. You might be wondering why. Virginia Hall, an American spy born in Maryland, used her prosthetic leg to secretly transmit information. Well, I guess that'll do it. She worked for the British Special Operations Executive and also for the CIA. Hall severed her dream of joining the Foreign Services when she accidentally shot herself in the leg during hunting. Wow, she Plaxico-Burressed herself. The left leg had to be cut off and replaced with a wooden prosthetic. However, even with her disability, she was a force to be reckoned with. She's pretty much considered America's greatest female spy. Virginia Hall had made it to the German Most Wanted list. She was helping the French resistance in the then-occupied France, having equipped 3 brigades with the necessary knowledge and skill to fight back against the Germans. She had proved that she was an absolute essential element in defeating the Axis forces. She was also successful in providing valuable reports to the SOE and had never been caught by the enemies. For her efforts in France, General William Joseph Donovan in September 1945 personally awarded Hall a Distinguished Service Cross, the only one awarded to a civilian woman in World War II. President Truman wanted a public award of the medal. However, Hall declined, stating that she was, quote, still operational and most anxious to get busy. She was also made an honorary member of the Order of the British Empire. Fun fact, she named her prosthetic leg Cuthbert and used the name as a code during her entire career as a spy. Number 7. NOOR INAYAT Khan. Born on the 2nd of January 1914, Noor Inayat Khan, also known as Nora Baker or Madeline, was an Allied Special Operations Executive Agent, trained to carry out espionage missions. She was a British spy of Indian and American origin who furthered the French resistance. She was a descendant of a South Indian ruler, Tipu Sultan. She joined the Physician Network headed by Francis Suttle and continued to send messages to London regarding the status quo of the network. Gradually, the members of the network were arrested and security was amped up. You'd think that with difficult times raining down on her, she would have gone back to London. But in fact, she was the only member of the circuit left, so she continued to elude Nazi officers in an attempt to serve the SOE. She couldn't make public appearances for long and had to be on the move constantly while contacting her bosses in London. What's incredible is that even though her employers betrayed her, she refused to give up any insider information to her captors. After her capture in Paris, she was tortured and shot in the head by the Nazis. Her last words were recorded and supposedly to be "Liberté." She was later bestowed with the prestige of the George Cross Award. NOOR INAYAT Khan is the first Asian Muslim woman to have a bronze sculpture established in her honor in Britain. Number 6. KLAUS FUCHS. KLAUS FUCHS was a nuclear physicist from Germany who worked for the British on a secret atom bomb project called tube alloys. He had also worked on the American and Canadian Manhattan Project. He's closely associated to the origin of nuclear weapons and the hydrogen bomb. He had fled along with his family to Britain in 1933 to avoid being persecuted by the Nazis. After the tube alloys project began, the Soviet officials had contacted him to obtain information about the project. He started sharing vital information with the Soviets through secret meetings after World War II. In 1950, he confessed to being a spy for the USSR to the British forces. Stripped of his British citizenship, he began to serve his imprisonment term of 14 years. A lot of people surrounding Fuchs were also implicated in this case, including his co-worker and sister-in-law. It was Fuchs' contributions that propelled the Soviet research into the right direction. He was released from jail in 1959, his term having been reduced because of good behavior, and sent to East Germany. Number 5. Mata Hari. A Dutch spy who worked for Germany, Margaretha MacLeod led a more colorful life in terms of her dancer background. She was known to be a courtesan and believed to be the quintessential femme fatale, what with her using her powers of seduction to wriggle out information from army officers. For you dudes out there that can't figure out what courtesan means, let's just say the more common term rhymes with hook and ends with Having studied to be a teacher, Margarita built the perfect facade. When she visited her lover in the hospital, she was roped into work as a spy by the German forces. They believed that she'd be able to allure the crown prince into telling her secrets of great importance. As part of the German Secret Service, she continued to perform in bars, attracting officials and other important authorities. This enabled her to supply Germany with reports. However, the French were alerted about her inconspicuous activities and began to track her. To save face, she had to show her loyalty to the Allies, and for that very reason, she went to Brussels with French orders. It all went down the drain when the French caught wind of a message pinpointing Mata Hari to be a German spy. She was executed in France on the 15th of October 1917 by a firing squad. Yeah, definitely some big risks for these types of jobs. Number 4. Earl Pitts. A former student of the University of Missouri, Earl Pitts was in the Army for 5 years and also a former FBI special agent. Having gotten a job at the FBI office in New York City, his responsibility was to investigate intelligence officers of the Soviet Union roaming undercover as diplomats. However, Pitts was found to be a traitor to the U.S. Apparently, he sold the information he had on these officers to a Russian spy simply because he had issues with the FBI. Really? That's all it takes? What happened and how officials found out he was playing for the other team is for sure just like out of a movie. What had happened was that Pitts himself had contacted the Russian embassy offering to sell his information as a past spy. That letter fell into the hands of a very cunning Russian diplomat named Alexander Karpov, who later himself became a turncoat for the U.S., and when he defected was when he ratted Pitts out to the U.S. The FBI caught Pitts by convincing him that the Russian government wanted to reactivate him as a spy. Pitts offered his services to the Soviets in 1987 while he was assigned to the FBI's New York office, where he was assigned to hunt and recruit KGB officers. After the sting began, Pitts' ex-wife, Mary Pitts, also a former FBI employee, told the FBI that she suspected her husband was a spy, though he never disclosed his status as a double agent to her. Now, I bet that's one of the toughest things to do, being a spy and not being able to tell anyone. Number 3. Josephine Baker. Invisible ink has helped many of us, but who'd have thought that it made for excellent spying tool? Baker was an entertainer during the Jazz Age. She had become very popular as a dancer and was given titles like Creole Goddess, Black Pearl, etc. However, she was later hired by the French military intelligence to assimilate all the information she possibly could about the Germans. Baker collected what information she could about German troop locations from officials she met at parties. She specialized in gatherings at embassies and ministries, charming people as she had always done, while gathering information. Her fame enabled her to rub shoulders with those in the know, from high-ranking Japanese officials to Italian bureaucrats, and to report back what she heard. She attended parties and gathered information at the Italian embassy without raising suspicion. Maybe they were fooled into thinking what she could possibly do with such data. For a little while, when the Germans took over France, she went into hiding, but later, she resumed her role as a spy in North Africa. When the Germans invaded France, Baker left Paris and went to her home in the south of France. She housed friends who were eager to help the Free French effort led by Charles de Gaulle and supplied them with visas. As an entertainer, Baker had an excuse for moving around Europe, visiting neutral nations such as Portugal as well as some in South America. She carried information for transmission to England about airfields, harbors, and German troop concentrations in the west of France. Notes were written in invisible ink on Baker's sheet music. I wonder how many famous musicians are spies now. Number 2, Yoshiko Kawashima. Raised in Japan, Yoshiko Kawashima was a Chinese princess of Manu descent. Born in May 1907, she worked as a spy for the Japanese Kwantung Army while the Second Sino-Japanese War was going on. Her spy career began in Shanghai when she met Tanaka Raikuchi, a Japanese intelligence officer. He used her connections to gain information, and even after he left for Japan, she continued to supply the Japanese with intelligence. Her missions were successful to an extent, and she quickly gained the favor of the royal family in China. Kawashima became well acquainted with Puyi, the last emperor of the Qing dynasty, who regarded her as a member of the imperial family and welcomed her into his household during his stay in Tianjin. It was through this close liaison that Kawashima was able to persuade Puyi to become a figurehead ruler for Manchukuo, a puppet state created by the Japanese in Manchuria. She is known to have trained 3,000 to 5,000 bandits. When she was captured for treason, she momentarily adopted her Chinese identity only to discard that so as to evade this charge. Her downfall came in 1948 in China when she was executed by Chinese counterintelligence officers with a shot in the back of the head. Number 1. Jason and Suzanne Matthews. Nicknamed the real-life Mr. and Mrs. Smith, Jason and Suzanne Matthews were spies who have been involved in operations concerning the Stasi, Soviet Union's KGB, and North Korea, for example. In case you forgot, Mr. and Mrs. Smith was a movie about a married couple who discovered that they were both assassins, with Brad Pitt and Angelina Jolie playing the couple. Jason and Suzanne worked for the American CIA, and Jason described his work as a spy as protecting his country's secrets while stealing those of the opposition. Now a best-selling novelist, Jason's book, Red Sparrow, has been edited by the CIA and is set to be made into a blockbuster movie. Kinda interesting, but it's a little ironic because I'd imagine when you work for the government, you'd think that you have a lifetime worth of secret keeping to do. Guess not. Anyways, it seems to be that they had a very superhero-esque job. During the day, they worked in embassies as diplomats, and at night, they were scouring for information beyond borders. Reportedly, they have experienced home invasions, threats, and the likes of which would give anyone the inability to sleep at night. And that went on supposedly even after their retirement. That speaks volumes about the delicate nature of their previous jobs as spies. For most people, learning a different language for their job is the toughest part of the job. But for Jason and Suzanne, it was probably as easy as it got. Here's what's next.
World War II escalated. Someone needed to stand up to Hitler, and that man was Winston Churchill. Granted, the political environment was actually pretty complicated at the time, but without Churchill's leadership, the UK might not have survived the war. While he was many things during his life, a writer, a soldier,